This Cannondale belongs to a guy called Tim. He gave us no smaller task than to build him the most extreme street shredder restomod that we have ever created. The Card 4 aluminum frame has all the hallmarks of a sick 90s bike. First and foremost, a colorway called Team Yellow to Charger Orange front fade, plus, with black-yellow quad-wrap decals, also dubbed the Afterburner fade. It appears to have no brakes, which is unusual. It does, however, have a metal door disc, not only in the rear, but also in the front. And that's not the last of this frame's curiosities. It also has some sort of harmonica device. This 26-inch wheeled youngtimer, as it turns out, is the 2000 Cannondale F1000 SL. And today, this bike will be our protagonist in Project Afterburner, in pursuit of the ultimate street shredder. Hey, what is up? I'm Alex, this is Bottoncino Bicycles, and we're once again sponsored by HOVERAir. They recently sent me their X1 PROMAX, which is a self-flying drone that is kind of like having your own dedicated camera crew in your pocket. It's a real game changer for this channel. More ride footage has been your #1 request for a long time, and the X1 PROMAX allows me to do just that in a much better way than I could have ever done before. I think the most recent video where we took a 92 M800 for a last ride on local trails really proved that. The drone has numerous different flight modes. For example, you can have it circle around you, hover above you, let it fly alongside you, which will become important later in the video. But of course, the ultimate party trick is cycling mode. Following feature where it will fly behind you and avoid any obstacles coming its way. And trust me, I did put that to the test. I will talk more about my experience with the X1 PROMAX in the next couple of videos. I'll walk you through all the different modes and so on. But if you're already convinced that this is what you need to capture your time out in nature, there's a link for you in the video description. So a big thank you to HOVERAir for being partners of this channel and allowing me to give all you watching exactly what you've always been asking for. But now let's focus on the build at hand. As you saw in the intro, this bike is a little bit different to what we normally work with on this channel. Truth is, I normally wouldn't have picked up this frame for a rebuild, but if you're a nice dude like Tim who shares my passion for Cannondales, I simply couldn't say no. Too rude to call it an addiction? Normally, I quite enjoy the simplicity of rigid frames and rim brakes. It takes me back to a time when I got my first mountain bike, and I would argue it gives you all the performance you need in an urban environment. At the same time, there is no denying that technology has moved on and disc brakes are objectively superior. The fatty headstock, while it doesn't add a ton of weight, ensures the bike remains firmly planted on the road at all times. And so if street shredders that we've built here in the past have been the car world equivalent of vintage sports cars, this bike today is going to be a thoroughbred race car. Before we can do any rebuilding, first we need to tear this thing down and clean the frame and the components that we're going to reuse. If you need any of the products that I use in the course of this video, like the Brunox penetrating oil or any of the new components that we're adding, the shop links are provided in the video description. Once the frame is completely stripped and clean, I'm going to walk you through the different areas of the bike and discuss some of the component choices for this build. So the format of this video is somewhat different than what you're used to. So let me know if you enjoy this slightly changed format and if you have any questions around why I do something a certain way or why I chose a certain component. I'm happy to answer that in the comment section. Now that the frame's clean, it's time to get our components lined up. First, we need to address the wheels situation. As you saw, the bike had a mismatched set with a silver front wheel and a mostly black rear wheel that came with an exposed rim braking surface, which we won't need, of course. Luckily, Tim also provided an all-black replacement wheel set. It will require quite a bit of TLC and some fresh discs. These wheels are nothing fancy. They are decent Shimano hubs laced to Mach 1 Sub-Zero rims. Compared to the high-end components that we will use throughout this build, they certainly are more on the cost-saving side of things. But I have a few ideas how we can spice them up. And for that, we first need to remove the rim decals. And as you know, whenever you try and remove any stickers, heat is your friend. Of course, we still need to clean, true, and service the wheels, but now that the wheels have been fully stripped, we essentially have a black canvas to work with. I think it will be nice to add some white branding to the rims, which should complement the tires really nicely. When I built a wheel set for my 95 M500, I added Bottoncino branding to the formerly Rigida rims, and I think something similar, if maybe a little more reduced, should be a good look here as well. And so I've decided to go with this. Just some small branding on the top of the rim. Now, tires. I've been testing the Goodyear Wingfoot Park on my M500 recently. Goodyear used to be the tire supplier of Formula 1 back in the 90s, so it's closely linked to performance in my head. The Wingfoot Park comes in tan and all black and has very minimalistic tread, so it's really a semi-slick tire, which is exactly what we need here. It rolls extremely well and is quite plush and comfortable at the same time. Plus, I'm a huge fan of the look with the oversized branding. Just gives these tires a real cool retro vibe. The full black and white look is already pretty cool, but I think we can add a little eye catcher, and for that I have chosen discs that look a whole lot like circular saw blades. I especially like that they're not completely silver, but the center section is kept black, which highlights that saw blade look even more and visually connects the discs even better to the black wheels themselves. And I also thought we could add some red. That just always looks racy, but I limited myself to just 3 of the disc mounting bolts, but I'm not too sure about the valve cap. We have quite a few options to choose from here actually. I think the skull and 8-ball, they don't really match the vibe of this bike. We could go for just plain black, but I think that might be a little too boring. And so I'm leaning towards the silver barrel valve caps. Given the frame design, the yellow could also work, but it's one of those things that you just have to try out on the wheels. What is still missing from these wheels are skewers. And again, on my M500, I have a set of safety skewers that are quite huge. And I mentioned in a previous video how they reminded me of center-lock wheel nuts on race cars. So they are the obvious choice for this build as well. That is our wheels done and ready to go on the bike. Next, we should talk about stopping power. The mechanical disc brakes that were on here had plenty of punch, but there is no doubt that hydraulic brakes would be a neat performance upgrade, which is exactly what Tim thought, and so he lined up a set of DRXT brake levers and calipers. They're really sleek looking, but of course our frame was not designed with hydraulic brake hoses in mind. To allow us to integrate them with as few zip ties as possible, we will use these hose holders that slot into the cable guides on the top tube of the frame. And I also think see-through zip ties will make for cleaner integration than black ones. To get our power down, we already have a 9-speed XTR derailleur on board, so there's no need for upgrades in that area. What we will change, however, is the crank setup. We will retain the stock Coda cranks, but move to a simplified 1x drivetrain. Our Bottoncino OG Big Boy chainring comes with 42 teeth to ensure you get the most out of your 9-speed gear range. It's available with 110 and the 94mm bolt circle diameter that we need in this case. I had been considering red chainring bolts, but as you saw on the wheels, these colored accents can get overbearing quickly, so I've decided against it. Instead, when we mount the cranks and pedals later on, we will add some custom designed pedal straps that integrate the frame's color fade from yellow to orange. The biggest change to how the bike will feel and handle will come from swapping out the factory stem. This thing is 135mm long, and as you can see in the slow-mo here, it causes a really stretched out riding position. My hands are quite awkwardly positioned very far forward. Not only is that not a nice position to ride in, it is also detrimental to the bike's handling. So I took measurements and found this beautiful 1.5-inch Thompson stem. It's used, but yeah, this is what it would have cost brand new. And to give us more control over our front end, I have chosen these 710mm wide FSA Gravity Light riser bars. They provide 40mm of rise, and don't they just look awesome as well? I always like it when there is a possibility to include stock components in a good way. And the great thing about these coda grips is that we can add barns to them. Admittedly, these barns are going on here simply for aesthetic reasons. And I have these short and stubby ones that I think should look quite cool on here. Adds to the race car winglet aesthetic in my opinion. The reason I started looking into Thompson components for this build in the first place is that I noticed that the models higher up in the model range, like the F3000 SL and the F4000 SL, actually came with Thompson seat posts back then. So it seemed fitting to me to upgrade to a Thompson Elite seat post here as well. By the way, I know I praise 90s frame designs a lot on this channel, but check out these designs from the 2000 catalog. Great color combos all around. Then you have the iconic blue Volvo models, the yellow tires. Cannondale offered some really cool bikes with outstanding frame designs back then. And speaking of frames, our last piece of the puzzle before we can put everything together, we still have a few stickers to remove from ours. It has these front and rear reflectors that remind me a lot of a different kind of vehicle, which is not exactly the level of sportiness I have in mind, so they will need to go. Heating them up usually makes the removal of stickers a lot easier, but in this case they just completely fell apart. All of them, so yeah, it took me a bit longer here. One thing that I've never understood with Cannondales is that some bikes don't have the model number written on them. And it's not specific models, it appears to be specific bikes, like for example the on the M900 that we rebuilt last year, that was also the case. Maybe that is specific to certain markets or something, I don't know. But ours doesn't have the model name written on it either, which gives us the chance to name it instead. And for this Afterburner branding, I've chosen a font that is not identical to the Cannondale decals, but similar style. I have prepared two different sizes, but I think the smaller one is going to be the way to go. The brakes may be the most obvious difference of this bike compared to the 90s MTBs we usually work on, but it's not the only one. Another difference is that this generation of Coda cranks requires an Octalink bottom bracket and not a square taper one. The thing is, there are two types of Octalink PBs out there, one for road bikes and one for mountain bikes. So naively, I ordered the MTB version, which is what you see on the right. And you can also see that it's clearly not the same kind as what was in here originally. And when I checked the spec sheet, it turned out that they did really use road BBs on these 2000 models, which meant I had to order another replacement part and move on to something else in the meantime. And yep, we are immediately faced with the next issue. The stem doesn't fit. So what happened here is that when I measured the steerer tube with the old stem attached, it came out to exactly 1.5 inches. What I didn't realize is that the actual steerer tube measured 1.56 inches. First I thought there must be a spacer on there or something, but no, it's just a very annoying design choice. So time to order yet another replacement part and try my luck with something else. Despite being called the Cellitalia Flight 1990, this is not a new old stock saddle. They still produce this one. It was the saddle to have in the 90s, and you can find a shop link down below. Alright, our 1.56-inch stem is here. Should you plan on swapping out the stem on an old Fetty Hedgehog, let me save you some time researching. This is basically your only option, which is not to say that you have to settle for something ugly. As much as it is a bummer we don't get to use the Thompson stem, I actually quite like this one as well. It's 60 as opposed to 100 millimeters, which certainly won't hurt, given that the top tube of this thing measures 62 centimeters, and it also shows more of the yellow on our bars. I'm just gonna flip it over because we're going for an aggressive setup, so that little bit of rise that it has is better used this way. And we now also have a Shimano 105 Octalink Road bottom bracket. All that is left to do now is hooking up the brakes, and for that we need to shorten the hoses. Before doing so, I want to make sure they're all tied down in their final positions though. I have the feeling that maybe putting two is a better integration. And with the hoses all cut to the correct length, everything being hooked up and brake fluids replenished, it's time to check out what we've built and how the riding position has changed compared to the beginning.